You don't need a huge budget if you're looking at Dubai property. And if you are assuming that you need millions in cash upfront, you are already starting from the wrong premise. Dubai pricing is often misunderstood because people compare it using the wrong benchmarks. So they compare downtown Dubai to Mayfair, Palm Jumeirah to Manhattan waterfront, Dubai Marina to central London. But they rarely compare what you receive for the price. In most countries, property purchases are front-loaded. Large deposits, mortgage approvals, significant capital immediately. Dubai, especially off-plan, often operates very differently. Okay, so you will see structures like 50-50, right? So half paid during construction, half at completion. So instead of deploying like the full amount on day one, your capital is staged across the construction timeline. Another feature that surprises many first-time investors is the ability to resell before the property is even finished. In most countries, this is not allowed. So instead of actually paying the 100% of the property value, you may have only deployed 30 to 40% of the capital, yet you are exiting based on the full market value at that stage. It's very important to note that you don't need to be a UAE resident. Buyers from the UK, Europe, the US, and other regions can still access financing here. Before we get into today's episode, I want to share something quickly. After building my last podcast, the Health Formula Show, to over 400 episodes, I realized something pretty crazy. Over 70% of the people listening to it weren't actually subscribed. And that matters because if you're serious about learning, staying consistent, and actually applying what you hear, subscribing makes a huge difference. So if you're serious about investing, creating long-term financial freedom for yourself, and making smarter, more informed decisions, hit the subscribe button. It really helps the show, and more importantly, it makes sure that you don't miss what's coming next. I am here to tell you that you don't need a huge budget if you're looking at Dubai property. And if you are assuming that you need millions in cash upfront, you are already starting from the wrong premise. And stay with me until the end because I am going to share a very practical insight that most investors, most first-time investors completely overlook. And it's often the difference between feeling priced out and realizing that the market is actually very accessible. Now, one of the most common things that I hear is like, isn't Dubai only for like the super mega wealthy people? And I understand why, we have that perception. I get it. The headlines show penthouses, waterfront villas, record-breaking transactions. I get it. But headlines do not reflect how most of the market actually functions. You need to speak to an insider. Dubai needs to be understood not only through price tags, but through structure, payment plans, and accessibility. And that changes the whole thing. Dubai pricing is often misunderstood because people compare it using the wrong benchmarks. So they compare downtown Dubai to Mayfair, Palm Jumeirah to Manhattan waterfront, Dubai Marina to central London. But they rarely compare what you receive for the price. Right? Square footage, amenities, build quality, service charges, tax environment, rental yield potential. Dubai is one of the few global cities where luxury exists, but so does a very wide mid-market and entry-level segment. The issue is not that Dubai is expensive. The issue is that most people only see the expensive layer of Dubai. Right? That bubble. Now, when I talk about affordability, I'm not speaking hypothetically. Okay, so let's talk real figures. With a strong developer in a good but not ultra prime location, you can still find an off-plan studio apartment launching at around, we're talking dirhams, 700k to 800k. That is roughly in USD, American dollars, 175 to 220k. Or in pounds, 140 to 175k, British pounds. So when someone says Dubai is only luxury, what they're actually seeing is the top 10% of listings, not the broader market. And to be honest, the key is not just the price. It's actually the stage of development that you are entering and the payment structure attached to it as well. But this is where Dubai becomes structurally very different from many other markets. And that's what people really don't understand. In most countries, property purchases are front-loaded. Large deposits, mortgage approvals, significant capital immediately. Dubai, especially off-plan, often operates very differently. Okay, so you will see structures like 50-50, right? So half paid during construction, half at completion, or 60-40, slightly more during construction, and then post handover, part of the balance paid after delivery. Now, these are really financial structures designed to widen accessibility and really manage cash flow for both developer and for the investor as well. So when I see a genuine like 50-50 payment plan on a strong project, that is where I personally get excited. I'm calling my family members, my friends, my clients, that is when I reach out and I say, this payment plan is excellent. Why? Because you are not overexposed early. You commit gradually. You maintain liquidity. You reduce risk if market conditions shift. But you still benefit from that appreciation during construction, which is amazing. Now, to make this a little bit more tangible, I really want to show you what this can actually look like in practice. So you might reserve a unit, all right, and then pay 20% within those 14 days of reservation, and then the 4% DLD, which is the Dubai Land Department registration fee. And that part is compulsory, unfortunately, on every single property purchase, whether it's off plan already. Then after that, the installments might be structured as 10% at 6 months, another 10% at 12 months, another 10% at 18 months, and then the remaining 50% upon handover. So instead of deploying like the full amount on day one, your capital is staged across the construction timeline. If we take a very, very simple example, let's say an 800,000 dirham studio, you're not writing an 800,000 check up front. You might be committing 160K at reservation. Okay, so that's around 32,000 British pounds or around 43.5 thousand USD, American dollars. Plus, obviously, the 4% registration fee to DLD that we spoke about, and then spacing the remaining installments over 1.5 to 2 years. And that changes accessibility entirely. You are entering gradually rather than all at once, while still benefiting from any appreciation that happens during that build period. Let me pause for 10 seconds because I've created something that might really help you out. It's called the First Time UAE Property Buyer's Blueprint, a practical guide to how international investors buy off-plan in Dubai and Abu Dhabi step by step. The link is in the show notes below or below this video if you're watching this on YouTube. Another feature that surprises many first-time investors is the ability to resell before the property is even finished. In most countries, this is not allowed. In Dubai, in the UAE in general, once a certain percentage has been paid, sometimes 30%, 40%, or 50%, depending on the developer, project ownership can actually be transferred to another buyer before handover. What this means in practice is that if you enter at a pre-launch, right, or early phase price, and the project is progressing well, by the time handover happens, the market value may have already increased. And so at that point, some investors, they choose to flip. So they sell the unit rather than waiting for completion. So instead of actually paying the 100% of the property value, you may have only deployed 30 to 40% of the capital, yet you are exiting based on the full market value at that stage. And so you're making a huge profit, right? And that is where the concept of return on equity comes in. This is obviously not guaranteed, and it depends heavily on timing, developer quality, and overall market conditions. But structurally, right, the option does exist. So it's important for you to be aware of this. And for experienced investors, having that flexibility is often just as important as the entry price itself. Then you have obviously way more aggressive plans, often seen with major developments like EMAR. So you might see payment plans of 80-20 or even like 90-10 structures. And these are more aggressive, obviously, because more capital is required earlier on. And so liquidity decreases sooner and exposure increases faster. But obviously, strong developers can absolutely do this because they are relying on brand trust, market confidence, and obviously historical demand. Now, aggressive does not mean bad. It just simply means different risk and different cash flow dynamics. Another misconception is that mortgages only apply to ready properties or only to residents. That is not accurate. Okay, so you can obtain mortgages on off-plan in the UAE typically once 50% has been paid, depending on the bank and depending on the project, right? And so it's very important to note that you don't need to be a UAE resident. Buyers from the UK, Europe, the US, and other regions can still access financing here. So accessibility is way broader than many assume. And what I would say as well is that friendly payment plans are particularly powerful for buy-to-let strategies because obviously by the time you receive the property, a significant portion is already paid, but not necessarily all. And so in some cases, rental income, you put a tenant in there and that money covers, the remaining balance if you have a payment plan post handover. Now, unlike many Western markets where rent is paid monthly, Dubai, the UAE in general operates in a check-based rental payments. So that means that tenants may pay in 1, 2, or 4 checks, across the full year. And sometimes they give you a single check upfront. So from a landlord perspective, this reduces massively, right? Like the uncertainty compared to those monthly payment systems. One thing to note as well is that, the legal framework around bounce checks is very, very strict, right? Like if that check is, bounces, and landlords face way less non-payment risk than in many European or US cities. It isn't very tenant friendly, to be honest with you, and that's obviously unfortunate to the tenant here, but it's amazing for the landlord because it really protects you as the landlord that is renting out your property. So essentially what I'm trying to say is that it does create a relatively secure environment for property owners. Now, one key thing to remember is that affordable does not mean low quality here. It really doesn't. It does not mean low demand, okay? It often reflects payment timing and structure, not the value of that asset. So 2 properties can have identical final prices and completely different accessibility depending on that installment distribution. Developers structure plans to essentially maintain construction cash flow, attract specific buyer profiles, accelerate those sales, and then compete with the neighboring projects. And I would say also to reduce financing risk. And so a well-designed payment plan can really drive demand way more effectively than a small discount. Like I'm a big believer of payment plans rather than discounts. So, you have a lot of these developers offering discounts, but this is just a psychology tactic because you should be paying attention to the payment plans, not necessarily to potential discounts that the developer might give you. And the reality is that smart investors, they are not just only looking at price. They are looking at cash flow, timing, okay? How much is my money tied up early? How flexible is that installment structure? Does it align with income cycles? Does it allow diversification? How does it affect the resale timing? What is my exit strategy? Because payment plans are not convenience. They are truly strategy, full-on strategy. And so the final point that I want to leave you with is that Dubai, Abu Dhabi, the UAE in general is not only accessible to the ultra wealthy, but it does require clarity. And it's one thing to understand pricing and payment plans in theory, but it's a completely different thing to align them with your personal capital strategy, to your risk tolerance, and to your time horizon. And once you understand how payment structures, mortgages, and rental dynamics actually work, the market, stops feeling intimidating. It really does. It's all about clarity and understanding how these things work. And that is exactly why we work with people in a very personalized manner, based on their specific investment strategy. So if this has resonated and you want to think through what this could actually look like for you, the best next step is to book a private call with me. You will find the link in the show notes or just below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you want to properly understand what off-plan property actually means, how it works, why global investors use it, and whether it's even right for you, then make sure you watch the next video because it truly breaks down the structure behind Dubai and Abu Dhabi's off-plan markets in a very, very practical way, especially if you're new to investing here.